Utah, give me two.
Utah, give me two. Yeah.
So, welcome to the Palazzo Podcast Prospect Power Half Hour. I'm your pinch hitting host for the week, Phil Goyette. And we've got Big Gentle Ben Chase with us as usual. You can follow Ben on Twitter at Big Gentle Ben. You can follow myself at Phil of Sports. And you can check out our show, the Prospect Power Half Hour, usually hosted by Mike Govier. And we're on every Wednesday night for a half hour. We try to get you the most info relevant to help you out with Dynasty, with fantasy, or if you just like talking prospects, that's actually what we like to do the most. So tonight for me, today for you, we're going to talk about kind of a recap of Dynasty baseball in 2022. Ben has put together some notes on some players who've exploded on the Dynasty scene this year, so we'll talk about them. Some guys who are exploding, but you maybe need to use some caution when you think about them for next year, or if you're doing like startup drafts this off season, which should be actually probably starting pretty soon, which is exciting. And then we're going to talk about some guys on competitive MLB teams that are prospects, but made the MLB jump this year and even contributed on some competitive teams. You're actually watching them contribute in the playoffs right now. Mm-hmm. So Ben's got some notes on those guys too. So we'll kind of go over all of it. And then as usual, if you want to leave us any comments here in the chat, I'll do my best to try and keep up with them and answer questions on the fly, which is our favorite thing to do. So Ben, how's it going, man?
Going good. Busy. I just put out today my pitcher and hitter of the year article as far as wrapping up the minor league season, and been busy with my day job, a little extra busy because we had some stuff going on, and so I haven't had a chance to do a lot of baseball writing lately, and so it's fun to just kind of dig in and do some of that. And boy, really looking at the minor league numbers, there's a lot of fun to just kind of see how guys did. I mean, there's just there's stuff that sticks out. You're just blown away at some of the numbers. And I mean, for instance, there's one guy in the entire minor leagues, Anthony Volpe, which everyone says had a rough year, right? Because everyone remembers his April and May, which was rough. And it led to his overall batting average this year is under 250. But he is the only guy in the minors this year who went 20-50. He had 20 home runs and 50 steals. Only guy in the minors who did it. But when I went through and did all my numbers, because there are, I think, 5 guys who went 20-40. There's just a number of other guys who had really good power plus speed numbers and just a whole lot of other stuff to deal with. Volpe didn't even make my list of guys who I even considered for the top player of the year. So it was a tough choice this year to really pick out my hitter of the year. The guy who I picked for my hitter of the year was Von Braun.
Love it.
He was batting average. He ended up having the highest batting average, the highest WRC plus in all the minors. He was actually literally 6th in on base and slugging. And I think
even with that crappy park, with the crappy park too, Richmond.
He had a 20. No, he finished in Richmond, but only had one game. But he played across almost evenly across both A-ball levels, which San Jose is pretty decent park, but Eugene is, but it's not great at the same time. I mean, it's a good park for hitters, but it's also you're playing at a college baseball park. There's advantages and disadvantages too. The wind comes across that park and can really mess with a ball. So you hit a ball that you think is going out and it hooks it foul a lot. There's a lot of balls that get hung up in the air that you hit, if you hit that ball up at all, a lot of times they get hung up in the air in that ballpark. So there's some things about Eugene that oftentimes prevent a home run, but he had just a tremendous year, went 20-40, just scored 100 runs. I mean, just a lot of really good things on the year. And coming from a D2 guy, that's a big year. And then, but at the same time, if you're looking for, I did that just based on pure numbers. For us looking at Dynasty, that's probably not a guy you're really terribly looking at because he's 24. And probably
I've got him a couple spots.
I picked him up in a league too.
Yeah.
But at the same time, probably not a terribly huge long-term guy. Although with his workout regimen, he could be one of those guys that pops up like a Mike Yastrzemski who comes up later, a 27-year-old guy that comes up and has a productive 4 or 5 year run. That absolutely could be the case.
And the Giants are not bad with these types of players.
Exactly. I was just to say he's in the perfect organization to have a slow burn development. But my pitcher is exactly the same guy that I've mentioned as far as our big breakout, the guy who was my pitcher of the year. And I actually put his last name incorrectly on the list I sent to Phil, which was actually a fun throwback to an old reliever that was a guy that I think I rostered all the time back in the day. I threw Andrew Bailey on there, but it's actually Andrew Painter.
Andrew Painter
is the guy.
Yeah, I figured.
Andrew Painter went from a high school draftee in 2021 to pitching well in Double-A by the end of the year. And 100 innings pitched, 150 strikeouts, led all of the minor leagues among qualified pitchers in FIP, in WHIP, was second in ERA, and was second in strikeout percentage. I mean, that's a hell of a rate or a hell of a thing for, like I said, you're talking about a guy who's, I think he finished the year at 20 years old. So you're still 20 in Double-A. That's
amazing.
That's
as a pitcher and a prep pitcher too.
And not only that, but he is showing command at 6'7". 6'7", that's always one of those, once you get over 6'5", that those guys that can actually command that stuff, and especially high school guys that can command that stuff at that height, are a rare find. And those guys that can do it usually end up as aces. And so that's the type of path that Andrew Painter has now put himself on. So if you have him in Dynasty, that's a hold. That's not
even though it's a
good trade chip sort of guy. That's I just found myself a holy crap, I ended up cashing in my penny poker chip and, got $1 million out of it or something, it's that was a hell of a deal right there. But the other guy that I just said was an exploding on the scene. Folks saw him last year, did really, really well, but Ellie De La Cruz, to go at the age he was, to hit the way that he did in Double-A, and really, I mean, he didn't just hit, but I mean, the tanks that he hit. I mean, the guy hit some of the biggest home runs of the year. Essentially, this guy, Ellie De La Cruz, is O'Neal Cruz with patience. Like, as far as the talent skills go, he's not 6'7", and that might help him down the road a little bit. But he's got a little bit less arm. But other than that, you're really looking at that type of a very similar skill set. High end, elite power, elite speed, and elite arm, and just all kinds of, just jumping out of the box talent. But yet he can also take a walk. And he's going to strike out some, but geez, can he just rocket a baseball? Yeah.
You take the strikeouts if he's going to hit it as hard as he does, as long as they stay around 30% or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he wasn't. I mean, Cruz all the way up was a 30% guy, and De La Cruz at the end of the year this year was at 25. That I'll take that. That's power hitters in the league are 25 to 30% guys. If you can finish, if you can keep that level of talent, man, that's going to be a fun player. If he can put that kind of power and still keep up some speed. I mean, you see guys like that in like Ronald Acuna. You know, players like that in the league are fantasy absolute difference makers when they're healthy. Byron Buxton, when he's healthy and actually running, those are difference makers on your teams.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this might be right. Acuna is somebody that has also chipped away at his strikeout rate throughout his pro career, or in the bigs, I should say. So he has made more contact as he progressed in the bigs.
From his minor league days, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. So it's not unheard of that, you know, Ellie De La Cruz could be 30% strikeout rate this year, you know, 27 next year, 25 the year following. Luis Robert actually kind of did the same thing with the White Sox. So when he actually plays, his strikeout rate has come down too. So we kind of
sadly
we got some people checking in. Govier checked in bed. Chad checked in bed. Now I don't know if they're in the same bed. What to maybe dig a little further on that one.
But yeah.
Russell said, "What's up?" So what's up, Russell? So if any of you guys have questions, make sure you fire them in. And then we got a question here. We're already talking about 2023 fantasy drafts. 2023, any players to draft for fantasy late round in drafts. And I'm assuming this is young guys. So maybe we'll jump to the MLB jump section that you put together, Ben, and we can talk about any of these guys if it's somebody you want to target late in your redraft leagues next year. So Ben had pointed out that this year maybe was unique in that we saw a lot of prospects making jumps on competitive teams and being contributors on those competitive teams. And we'll start with the Braves because Ben's on the show. But no, really the Braves are just, you have to admit, have been pretty consistently strong in this area of having players make an MLB jump and then being a consistent contributor and then eventually becoming core players. So this year they had really a three-headed monster of guys that got called up: Spencer Strider, Michael Harris II, and Vaughn Grissom. And you know who's not on here, but I would think too. What about William Contreras too? Was another guy, that made a pretty good transition. Yeah. So,
and the only reason I think I didn't have him on here is because he wasn't rookie eligible coming into the year. So
there you go.
Like I think all these guys that I had on the list that I gave you were rookie eligible, but there's other guys on each team that were in their second year or things like that. So, but yeah, there's the Braves, you have some definite excellent young players. I mean, and you could go as far as that goes. Dylan Lee in the bullpen had a hell of a year as a middle reliever. And, you know, there were times when he was the setup man based on some injuries and things going on. I mean, there's some tremendous, they're willing to bring up a guy, put him into the right spot and let him show whether or not they got it, which that's impressive. And you and I were talking before the show about Bryce Elder, same thing. Came up and it was 4 or 5 starts this year, but he failed or mid-season, came up, kind of got hit around pretty hard in a couple of starts, but they stayed with him. And at the end of the year, when they just needed to run out the string, when Strider was down and they needed someone to eat some innings, and that's what Elder does really well, is just he goes out and he just eats up innings. He did, and he did it extremely well. He tossed a shutout, that 9-inning shutout, which that was the first complete game for the Braves of the season. Was the shutout that he pitched in the last week of the year. That's, impressive just right there. But no, Strider
as they were putting away the Mets, like the kid on The Simpsons, stop, they're already dead.
Well,
they bring Elder up for the curb stomp at the end. Well, and we talked about maybe the Braves trust their ability to understand the personality of their prospects. And Ben, you had an interesting point about Spencer Strider. If you want to maybe elaborate on what they saw in Strider the year that they drafted him that maybe other people didn't see.
Well, and he's he's a guy. He is a very much a I don't know if you call it a book guy. He gets into studying his game post game. And that was something that they had talked about after drafting him out of Clemson, that he was a guy that really was big into talking about and studying how his spin rate was changing, how is all that stuff. And it was the shortened 2020 season. He had really kind of made the transition to a starter that year. So he really didn't have a whole lot of show as a starter. And so he kind of came in going, okay, I'm willing to do some work to change, to do what I need to do. And if you can show me it's working, I'm willing to do that. Well,
yeah,
you have that sort of attitude walking into a program there. I mean, find me a major league team that isn't willing to work with a player like that. And especially one that's got enough arm talent to end up pumping out 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. I mean, Strider last year was working with I don't know if they call it the bowling ball slider, because it kind of falls off the way that Luke Jackson's slider is what it's known as in the Braves bullpen. But that's what they taught Strider in spring training 2021. He worked on it, ended up in the bullpen at the very end of the year last year, at the major league level. And everyone kind of thought, oh, well, then, he'll be a fastball slider guy making the bullpen. That'll work. Well, over the offseason, he said, you know what? I think I'm going to change my slider shape just a little bit and get a distinct curve too. Well, he didn't use that curve very much because the slider shape that he got was so hard for hitters to distinguish from his fastball that it was an incredibly effective slider. And he actually found that it put less stress on his elbow. He could throw it repeatedly. It became a pitch that he could basically become a 2-pitch starter with that fastball slider. He found that through working with the coaches, looking at the numbers, the analytics on those pitches, and folks like to give him a hard time about his start with the Mets where he came off the field and went, yeah, they just got lucky against me. Well, it's because he looked at the numbers and saw that they had like 6 hits against him and 5 of them were expected batting average of like 180. And so he quite literally,
it's not a bad attitude.
Bunch of stuff.
Not a bad attitude to have as a pitcher, because then you can flush it.
And that's,
but it's not like they beat him. They just, I love it. All right. So let me give you a fantasy question with the Braves guys. I'm going to throw Strider out between Harris and Grissom. Who's the better? Let's just go redraft. Who's the better redraft player next year? Who will make you more money in redraft, Harris or Grissom?
Easily Harris, just because he absolutely has a role.
Yeah.
Grissom very well could end up starting the year in AAA. I do believe that there's a good likelihood that he's spending 90% of the year in Atlanta, but simply because depending on what they do with Swanson, shortstop, what they do at that shortstop position, I don't think they will trust him at the shortstop position. With the shifting rules coming in, everything like that, he's not going to be able to handle that position. He's never played competitive outfield. So you need to have some work with that stuff. And he's going to need an off season of that and probably a little bit of spring, at least some springtime. And it might be he spends a month in Gwinnett learning or playing outfield too. Now, the other end of things there, we've seen Ozzie can go down, at second base. They could, bring in a guy that they intend to, I have a feeling that one of their money things this offseason is going to be eating Ozuna's contract. It's one of those things that's kind of loudly being whispered by people within and without the Braves organization. But they do that, well, then there's going to likely be a bat brought in that can play left field and or DH. And then, so you have, if somebody needs to fill in left field and Grissom gets some work to where he can handle left field, get some DH time, where he could end up being a guy who plays a little left field, a little second base. Maybe he gets some time over at third, gives Dansby a day off at short or something, Now that said, Dansby is one of two guys in MLB that played 162 games this year. The other guy was Matt Olson. So, if Swanson returns, it might not be a spot where they're actually he's going to get a lot of playing time at shortstop, but the Braves will find a way to push guys into spots. The thing I love about Harris is you have the power speed combination. I do believe if you're looking 3 years down the road, I think Grissom could be the better overall hitter.
Interesting. Okay.
I think he's going to have an average plus power that is going to be a better overall package. And I don't know that Harris has the overall upside as a hitter. His overall upside as a player is absolutely higher because of the defense combined.
Sure. Yep.
But I think he's probably more along. I think if you get a Mike Cameron type of line from Harris, where you're getting maybe a 20-20 line and you're getting 270, that's probably a what you can expect out of a Harris. And
Mike Cameron, not a Daz Cameron line, a Mike Cameron line.
Yeah. I think that's probably. I think there's going to be some seasons he does a little better speed-wise or a little better with power, but I think that's probably where he sits.
Like his baseline, his pulse.
Yeah.
But
I think Grissom could be a guy that could potentially get up to a 30 home run guy, and he's absolutely got excellent. The wrist speed is just what I blinds you when you watch him hit, because he can adjust and still flip the wrists and get a single. And it's so much fun to watch his minor league tape and see that. I think that long term he's the better overall hitter.
Yeah. Well, we had some questions come in while we're talking Braves, so I want to make sure we get to the questions because we're actually kind of running out of time, believe it or not. Okay, so Chad had an interesting one here. The flip side, so not who had a great season, but who had a rough season this year. The biggest MLB minor league loser this year, and it seems to unanimously be Mason Martin of the Pittsburgh Pirates from my research. I always was a big Martin guy, liked him. I think that he seems like the type of player that can work through stuff based on my experience from people who have talked to him. I haven't, but others have. But it's an interesting point. What do you think about Chad's point on Mason Martin of the Pirates?
I don't know if it's even so much Martin's fault. I think Pittsburgh had some guys that have very similar profiles that are either at the same position or at other positions that may bleed into that. A guy like Andy Rodriguez is going to likely play catcher, but has a big enough bat that they're going to want to make sure his bat stays in the lineup. So he's going to probably get some DH time. Guys like Matt Gorski, he got injured. He missed quite a bit of time, still had a 2020 year, was one of the minor league leaders in slugging percentage. But absolutely is an outfield DH type. There's a number of guys like that. And then of course you saw all the guys that pumped up into the Cal Mitchells, the list of guys that came up and played in Pittsburgh that had a pretty solid either AA or AA and AAA or AAA season and got at least a little bit of run at the major league level. It's very possible that he got surpassed on their depth chart by quite a few guys having pretty solid seasons.
Yeah. And his big issue is his limitation in the field, like you said, unless he's absolutely raking. Whoever's absolutely raking in that spot is the one that's going to get the first shot at it, right?
Yeah.
So being a first base DH type. Christian Crespo, what's up, Christian? He mentions Nick York as a disappointment this year. What's your feelings on that? I have my own, but what do you think about Nick York as being a kind of a disappointing prospect relative to his expectations, which I think were pretty huge?
I think that's the big thing. Is I think he's a lot of folks expected a top 100 sort of guy that was going to eventually be. I think a lot of folks see York and they think Dustin Pedroia, and I just don't think he's that guy. I think he's going to potentially be a 250 hitting version of Dustin Pedroia, which means that instead of getting you 40 doubles and 25 home runs, he gets you 25 to 30 doubles and 10 to 12 home runs and hits you 250 with quality defense. That's not the same player for fantasy players. It could be just fine for the Red Sox plugging up second base, but it isn't the same player for fantasy players by any means. And that's, I think a lot of folks were expecting that. And especially he had a really strong start to his minor league career, hit very well in his debut. And so I think a lot of folks thought, well, shoot, this is going to be who he is, right? And no, he just didn't hit like that at all. So
the truth is probably somewhere in between, like Ben said, but maybe not somebody you're banking on in Dynasty, but maybe you shouldn't have in the first place. He did sort of come out of nowhere initially. So then his expectations got really high as a result, but maybe they were a little too high in him to begin with. So, all right, I like this one because I have him in a league. Matthew Z asks us, CJ Abrams, bust or trust? Do you trust Abrams for, I'm going to say Dynasty leagues moving forward?
Dynasty, absolutely trust him. When
so
he was drafted,
still, right? Yeah.
I ended up interviewed by a radio station out in San Diego, and they wanted to know, so who did we just pick? And I said, projection wise, you're going to get a combination of Jimmy Rollins and Jose Reyes. So they said, ooh. And I said, although I'm not sure what you're going to think about this, because I'm going to tell you that he's going to have a batting average like Jimmy Rollins, but he's going to have power and speed of Jose Reyes. They kind of thought for a second. They're like, well, that still could be pretty darn productive. And it absolutely can be. But I think folks got to be very careful on what their expectations are with him, because I don't see him. There's a lot of folks who've labeled him as a future batting champion. I don't see that in his swing. I don't see that in his contact ability. But there's a whole crap ton of speed. And when he does get the ball into the outfield, he turns singles into doubles like nobody's business. He has a really good knack once he's on the bases of turning 2 into 3, of turning, so he's going to get doubles and triples that he shouldn't.
Smart play.
And so, he's going to be
on top of the physical skills.
Yeah, he's going to score you a ton of runs. He's going to get a lot of stolen bases. It's going to be, like I said, Jose Reyes in those really good Mets years, but hitting 260 instead of 290. So that's a pretty desired player, I guess, in my book personally. But that's, I don't know.
Here's my question: is he a shortstop?
I think so. One of the things I was really, I've always wondered that myself, but then I watched him when the Braves and Nationals played, and he is smooth on his transitions. I was always wondering that watching him in the minors, because there was some effort to it. There was some, you could tell that he was learning it. Man, he was just so smooth on defense. And just the transitions, picking up the ball, getting it to first, picking up the ball and flipping it to second. And there were a number of plays where he was, making a great defensive play to keep the ball out of the outfield and just hold a guy to an infield single on a ball that should have dribbled through and potentially could have been in the gap, or things like that. The guy's making plays that, geez, it's impressive, and I think that's going to be something they really value, especially behind the pitchers as they come up. They've got guys like Cavalli coming up. They've got a young pitching staff that should start to arrive here soon. Yep. And, that team has got a long ways to go, to put it bluntly.
He's certainly more of a shortstop than my guy, Luis Garcia. That is something we definitely learned this year, is Luis Garcia is not a shortstop moving forward.
But, the two of them up the middle together,
they could work.
Could be a really good defensive combination. I really think they could be, because I think
they could be, and they could be two guys that could work offensively, but I don't think either of them are middle of the order hitters. So,
God, no. Yeah. No, I think Garcia,
so we're gonna have to find that somewhere else.
Garcia is kind of your perfect 7-hole, 6-hole hitter. Mm-hmm. Like, going to hit you 20, 260. But
I'm comfortable with him hitting 7th.
Yeah. I mean, but that's. I agree with that. Yeah.
Anthony, he left. Anthony's in the chat. Hey, Anthony. Hey, I'm late. So Govier left. We had the one where we said we were getting rid of him, and now we went through with the coup actually, and Ben and I are in the ivory tower of the Palazzo podcast, hanging out and just taking over. Govier did want to know who is sexier between myself or Ben. That's a tough. You guys can have some time to think about that one.
Our wives may have different opinions.
Here's Christian on. Christian makes a good point on C.J. Abrams. I'm going to read it. So give me a sec. Christian Crespo said, everyone is so crazy to dismiss Abrams. He was drafted in 2019 as a prep, and I think he was young that year too. Didn't play in 2020. In the 2020 season, was hurt for all of 2021, and then he got forced to the majors really out of the blue this year because of Tatis, and the Padres were competing and needed somebody there. And then he gets traded too to the Nats. So Christian still believes he's going to be a very good player. I think we do too. It's just a matter of what's he going to do for you for Dynasty. So we could talk about all this stuff. We could have a 2-hour show on this stuff. Mm-hmm. Here at Chad. Another big winner to me is someone me and Ben have discussed at length. It isn't even due to a great year, but Jackson Rutledge coming back and dragging back into future starter conversation. Jackson Rutledge of the Nationals, big fellow with a big fastball. I actually grabbed him in a dynasty he was basically free. I kind of glad that I picked him up because I'm agreed with Chad. There's a chance he's still a starting pitcher. What do you think, Ben?
He's at least giving himself a shot. He's kind of getting at the point where he's going to end up in Rule 5 drafts here soon and things like that. So, I mean, his team's going to have to make a decision to protect him. But
he's on the perfect team for it.
Yeah. That's just it. I mean, he's on a team that actually can do that. They can put him on and start, and use up his option years and all. I mean, he's on the type of team that can give him the chance to,
just go out there and pitch.
Yeah, just go out, take your friggin' beating. But that's just it. They're who else are they going to throw out there? That's just it. So, but
yeah. Well, Ben, we're over our time. So maybe we do part 2 next week. Ben still has a ton of notes that we didn't get to. Let me give you some names of guys explode. Here, let's do this because we didn't get to this, and these are good. This is under Ben's exploding, but to have some caution. I'm just going to list the names, and then maybe Ben can give us kind of a quick reason why we should be cautious. Jackson Chourio, the 18-year-old wonder kid that made it to Double-A this year. Zach Veen of the Colorado Rockies. Joe Boyle, 153 strikeouts on 102 thirds inning pitched. And Gordon Graceffo of the Cardinals in his sub-1 whip. So these are guys who had great years, are exploding on the scene, but maybe there should be some caution. We'll let Ben kind of freestyle on it as to why that might be the case.
And each one of them, love all four of them. And I will say I have at least one share of all four of those guys. It's not that I don't.
These are guys you want to have still. Yep.
But I think they've each been pumped up pretty hardcore. And I mean, especially a guy like Churio has been pumped up big because of age related to level. But it's good to note that after he left low A, he hit 227, 292, 433 the rest of the way in high A and double A ball the rest of the year. Just something to, be aware of. Zach Veen this year, everyone notes that 12 home runs, 55 steals at 20 years old. Huge. But he hit a $177 in double A in the double A time that he had. Now, that said, Veen is going like gangbusters in the AFL so far. So watch him because that could be a big, platform for him to leap forward from. And
I love that he's still playing well, and it's been a long part of the challenge of the AFL for these kids is that they've never played a season that long before. And then they throw the AFL at them too, right?
And that's a huge deal too. Yeah. Boyle, all those strikeouts, has some wicked stuff, but he also walked 84. I think it's I want to say it was a top 5 walk rate among qualified pitchers, but yet he somehow had a 286 ERA. So be wary of that. It's some wicked stuff, but he, keeping it in the zone is kind of an issue. But Gordon Graceffo, going up to double A, for one, his overall ERA to FIP, there's a run difference, but it gets worse when he finished the year in double A. He had a 3.94 ERA and a 5.07 FIP. So field independent pitching says that he was a lot worse than what his numbers showed once he got to double A. Just some things to be wary of that, maybe there was some luck involved with the numbers that they put up. It doesn't mean that they aren't guys to be watching or holding on to, but they are guys that be wary of jumping in with both feet because there's some things here that are saying, hey, just a second here. There's something else going on too. So
yeah. Excitement, but not perfection.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we're going to wrap it there. Next week, maybe we'll talk some more on the same topic. I love answering the questions too in the chat. So if we just do a chat next week, I'm happy with that. That's awesome. Lots of cool names coming out in the chat. It's already, as Christian said, it's Dynasty startup season already. So October is not too early to be. Yeah, it's AFL too, which is great. So it's not too early to start thinking about this stuff. And then most importantly, we got playoff baseball. I don't know how the Americans are taking the schedule of the thing. For me over here, it's been absolutely perfect so far. It's kind of baseball all day, the way it lines up here, and in windows there I can watch it. So I think it's absolutely fantastic. I like the staggered start thing. I'm digging watching the highlights in the next day of the stuff I missed, like Jordan last night. So baseball absolutely not broken. They just need to figure out that playoff energy and put it in a box and keep it all season. If they can do that, it's the best sport in the world. Playoff baseball is just incredible. You don't even have a team in the hunt, and I'm loving enjoying all of it. I was loving watching the Mariners smashing the Astros yesterday before I went to bed. Made me so excited to see them just smashing the Astros. And then you wake up and see, well, not quite. The Astros and Jordan walk them off. So it was perfect. It's great stuff. So anyway, I'm rambling. Ben, take it easy. We'll see you next week as always. Veteran chatters in the Palazzo chat. We'll see you guys next week too. And hopefully we'll see Govier back next week so we have a proper host. But that's it for me. That's it for Ben.
Yeah, hopefully we've played game 2 of the Braves-Phillies series by then, with all the rain delays. So
I think maybe we can riff on this for a minute, Ben. I think that's going to be a good series.
No, they play well. The Phillies
Yeah.
and Braves have over the last few years have played very well against one another. And so when this ended up being the series, the big way that I knew that the Braves would have a shot is if they got into the bullpen. And then Fried struggled last night. That was definitely going to be the Phillies game. And lo and behold, the Braves came back
almost wasn't
near the game because they got into the bullpen.
Yeah.
If they would have been able to, if they didn't have the Phillies didn't have that cushion from the early innings, the Braves would have had that ball game. And that's going to be what the Braves game plan has to be, is to knock out the Nola, the Wheeler, all the way along. And what folks don't, they've still got a Syndergaard sitting there. They've still got, the Phillies got some depth in arms right now, and Kyle Gibson and all these guys that they've got that you may not think are elite, but they can eat up some innings. They could give some length so that the good arms they actually have in the bullpen don't have to keep throwing every single night. So
I've got a feeling maybe it comes down to something like defense, base running, and in that you got to give the Braves the edge. Just my personal take on it. And Real Muto's a weapon for the Phillies on the base paths, but he can't cover everything, and I don't think the infield defense is great. So.
And last night, the big play was a defensive play by Nick Castellanos. Made a tremendous catch.
Unexpected, but
it on William Contreras. If he doesn't make that catch, who knows how the rest of that inning plays out. So that's absolutely. But that's playoff baseball.
You could see Acuna hunting extra bases out there when he was on the base pass too, though.
Oh yeah,
he was like a shark looking for that one small window to get in. So I don't know. I think it's gonna be a good one. I think it'll be a tight one. We'll see what happens. But next week, maybe they'll play 2 games by then.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, I'm out of here. Take care, guys. We'll see you next week. Bye, Ben.
Bye.